Hi everyone, Daljeet Peterson here from astrolab21.com. And in this video we're going to be doing a special astrological weather report, if you will, because there's a lot of astrological weather coming our way in the next couple of weeks here at the end of May and as we move into the beginning of June. And I talked about a few of these things in my last video on Gemini season, but this week we're going to be having a full moon, which is a supermoon, a flower moon, and a blood moon, because it's a total lunar eclipse. So super, blood, full, flower, moon, right? That sounds pretty heavy duty. And then 3 days later, we're going to have Mercury going retrograde in its own sign of Gemini, which it'll do for the next 3 weeks. So that's going to be intense, coming right after this full moon that we're having. And of course, as we've been talking about, we've got Jupiter moving into Pisces. Well, all these things are in this tense T-square on that full moon too. So all these energies are combining in a way that I think is going to play out for all of us over the next couple of weeks. So I thought it'd be a good idea to jump on and do a video looking at just these specific configurations and take a run through all 12 of the rising signs so we can see where is this going to show up for all of us based on a rising sign in each of our charts, and where we can focus that energy and learn to sort of deal with it, handle it, and make the best plan for accommodating some of these intense transformational energies that are coming our way over the next few weeks. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to dive into the charts and have a look. So, of course, before we step in, I do always want to take an opportunity to do some quick promotions. As always, at astrolab21.com, my website, you can go to book a reading. I've added some new options in terms of the chart reading menu that I have. So great way to support what I'm doing. And if you really want to learn more about your own chart, the Blueprint of the Soul reading is a fantastic way to do a deep dive into what's going on in your own birth chart. Also, I did launch a Patreon page under Daljeet Peterson, so I've got a few membership levels there and some incentives if you want to support me through Patreon, and as well at Ko-fi.com if you want to just say thanks and buy me a $3 cup of coffee. Every little bit helps, so I appreciate anything that you guys can do. All right, so let's jump in and talk about the subject of this talk, which is Mercury in retrograde. And I said I wrote an article this morning for Medium, and I titled it, Tweaking the iOS of Your Soul. And I think that's really a great metaphor. It's an opportunity that we really do have with every Mercury retrograde season, right? We always hear about a lot of the negatives of Mercury retrograde, and they're real, right? You're going to get miscommunications and missed connections, right? We have slips of the tongue and lots of technical glitches and memory problems and lost data. We're advised not to start anything new or to sign contracts or to undergo any kind of elective surgery. And those are all really important guidelines because things can get a little out of whack during Mercury in retrograde. But something that's less often focused on is it's also a time to really, it can be a very productive opportunity, because anything that we'd already started before that retrograde period, we get a really a chance and an opportunity to go back and to review it and to retool it and to work out some of the kinks. So I love this metaphor of, tweaking the iOS of your soul, right? Because these computer metaphors, they're really profound, I think, for us in this modern day. That makes a lot of sense because in a lot of ways all of our mental processes, right? Gemini, Mercury, it's very much like a software program, right? We've been adding programs to our system ever since we were born, right? And we have a lot of very old scripts, right? And some old apps that we've been running. Some of them probably are outdated, but we're still using them. We're still running them on an old OS that's gotten a little slow and sluggish and not responsive. So all of these Mercury retrograde periods are a good chance to go and review those and maybe rewrite some of that code, maybe delete some of the apps that aren't working so much and so well for us anymore, install some new ones, upgrade the code, so that when it moves forward again, we have a clean OS. We're running, we're running at our optimal level. So, nice analogy and a good way to look at Mercury retrograde periods, particularly this year, because all of them are in air signs. We already had the retrograde period in Aquarius back in February. We'll be having this one in Gemini, and then in the fall we'll have a retrograde in Libra. But I think this one is going to be probably the most intense. A, because it's in its own sign of Gemini, and B, because it's following this intense lunar eclipse that we're having this week. So that energy is getting encapsulated because of what's going on with the eclipse season. It's actually the beginning of the eclipse season for 2021 that we'll be dealing with, because they're occurring on that Gemini-Sag axis, and we'll look at the charts and we'll see why that is, and talk about some of those, the symbolism of what we're dealing with the eclipses this year and have been dealing with, for the last year or so. So lots to talk about and unpack. So let's just jump in and look at the charts, and just roll up our sleeves here a little bit. So basically, I've got the chart up here for May 26, which is about 3:55 in the morning here. West Coast time is when the full moon will be exact. So we've got Sun in Gemini at 5 degrees with the moon in Sagittarius. Now, why is this an eclipse? Well, eclipses happen when a new or full moon occurs within about 10 degrees of the nodal axis, the north and south node. And as we can see here, the nodes that are about 10 degrees respectively of Gemini and Sagittarius. So this is what causes a lunar eclipse, right? If we were to look at the solar system here, and again, here we have it pulled up for May 26, and we can see that, as always, on a full moon, we have the moon on the opposite side of the Earth from the sun. But because this is taking place on the ecliptic, which is not a real, it's a point, it's not a place, it's not an object per se, it's a point that occurs in space where the moon is said to cross the ecliptic. So whenever we get full or new moons near or at or near that point, it causes an eclipse. And so the light of the sun is going to be blocked out by the Earth, causing an eclipse phenomenon, which we will be able to see, I think, from most Western America, throughout the Asia and Pacific. We'll get a pretty good view of at least part of this eclipse on Wednesday night. So that's what's going on. That's the sort of background of the supermoon, full moon, blood moon, right? The blood moon just means it's an eclipse. And flower moon is just what we call the full moon of May, in this time of year, right? It's that full blossoming of spring. We had the pink moon last month during Taurus season, so that moon in May is referred to as flower moon, because everything really is at its full blossom here as we reach the end of spring and prepare to mutate into the summer season. So, of course, a lot going on with Gemini, because as we also talked about in the most recent videos, we got Mercury and Venus also in Gemini. So this real stellium going on in the sign of Gemini, and the sign of the twins. Lots of energy, lots of focus on communication, on self-expression, on ideas, a very mentally stimulating, social, active, communicative, expressive type of energy, being constellated by this full moon, and then that moon in the opposite sign of Sagittarius conjunct the south node, right? So we talked a little bit about, what's going on with the nodal axis. Well, the south node is the past. I always think about the nodal axis as kind of our compass, right? It's pointing us from the past and to the future, the north node. So we're really dealing with is this archetype between Sagittarius and Gemini. Right? And these are very connected, where Sagittarius tends to be our wisdom, our deeper understanding, as opposed to Gemini, which is more about information, which is more about knowledge, understanding in a more immediate way, more personal way. Sagittarius understanding tends to be a more collective, more socially oriented, right? More integrated. But there's a dynamic that occurs between these two archetypes. And so as we've been having the nodes moving through these two signs for, as they will, for about 18 months, right? This is really our focus. We're really being called to focus on what's the past in terms of Sagittarius. What is our old belief systems? Sagittarius is all about belief. It's all about our spirituality, our philosophy, our cosmology, our ways of making sense of the world. Religion comes under that. Mythology, right? All of these, the natural laws. So we're getting a chance to really review some of those with the South Node and go, okay, what might need to be revised? And how do we move to the North Node, to this new idea, some new visions, Gemini, new ways of thinking, new modalities? And we've talked a lot about this over the course of the last few months, this push-pull dynamic between the old and the new, right? And this is the area of life where we're focusing on those. And now with this full moon occurring in these two signs, well, that's just going to be really exacerbated and intensified. It's like a doubling down of that tension that we're all going to really feel pretty profoundly, I think, over this week. And then that carries over and continues for the next 6 months until we'll have a full moon in the opposite signs, and we'll have another eclipse in Sagittarius season later, coming up into the fall and into the winter at the end of the year. So lots going on. And now we did talk about Jupiter as well. And if we bring Jupiter in here, it has just moved into the early degrees of Pisces. And again, I did a whole video on Jupiter and Pisces. We talked about dipping our toes into the water. And the reason for that is that it's only going to move through the first couple of degrees here of Pisces before it starts its own retrograde period, where it will go back through Aquarius and spend most of the rest of the year in a retrograde and then moving back forward. And it won't be until, again, the end of the year, towards the next eclipse season, before we'll see Jupiter back in Pisces again. So what's interesting is this is forming a pretty tight T-square here on the day of the full moon between that sun and moon configuration. So I feel like this is a real seed being planted on Wednesday during the full moon, during this eclipse, and I think we have a chance to really work with this energy over the course of the next few weeks, very intensely during the Mercury retrograde period. So I thought it might be useful to kind of run through each of the rising signs, see where this energy is showing up for all of us, and maybe make some plans for how we can deal with it and navigate some of these energies. So right away we can see, based on this timing, we have, if we start with Aries rising here, well, natural zodiac, of course, these are all occurring in your 3rd and 9th houses respectively. So that sun and all that Gemini energy in your natural 3rd house of communications, of learning, of self-expression. So lots of energy for you Aries rising folks this month to really focus on your communication, your self-expression, your daily routines, things that are going on in your immediate environment, in your neighborhoods. Maybe education and something about schooling is coming up for you. But lots of energy, and of course that's also where this retrograde is going to take place as Mercury backs up through the sign, and anything that you've started recently in this area of your life, new ideas, communications, writing or proposals that you've been doing, plans that you've been making, great time to review those, to look them over, to revise and improve on them, because if you get it right, there's something maybe missing that you want to review and go over, so that when it goes direct later in the month of June, then you'll be set up, and all this energy from Gemini season in your 3rd house will be much more productive and valuable. So be on the alert for that. Of course, with Jupiter moving into Pisces, moving into your 12th house. So what's going on here? Well, Jupiter, the expansive, great beneficent, right, is trying to bring some energy into your 12th house, which is your house of really deep spirituality or super intense creativity. It's a very creative house. It's a very spiritual house. On the downside, it's also the house of self-undoing. It can be a house of being confined or imprisonment often. But Jupiter moving through the 12th house is you're getting a hint of something that's going to happen over the next year. But just a taste of it, because it's going to really move back through your 11th house where it's been spending most of this year. So presumably for Aries rising folks, a lot of that Jupiter energy has been moving through your 11th house of social connections and social networks. There's probably been some big expansive opportunities in your peer group, or something has shown up in community for you that's probably been pretty expansive. Now, when Jupiter makes its retrograde, maybe there was a missed opportunity there. Maybe there's something you need to go back and reflect on, an opportunity that needs to be captured within your peer group, someone in your sphere of influence, perhaps, that maybe there's an opportunity that you passed on. You may be getting a second chance at that. So keep an eye out for that from my Aries rising folks. All right, so we'll try to move through these somewhat quickly. If I move the clock forward here, we can move to a Taurus rising. So what's going on with Taurus rising folks? Well, the full moon, the eclipse, is now happening in your 2nd and 8th house axis. So for Taurus risings, Gemini falls in the 2nd house. This is all about your values, about your resources, your finances, your money, right? And Taurus rising folks, you tend to be very good at using your mind, using your ideas, using your language and verbal skills as a resource, as a way of earning a living, as a way of making money. And so probably a lot of focus, a lot of mental activity, right, around your areas of finance and resources for this month. Certainly things of value, right? And so opportunities have come. And with Mercury retrograding through the sign, likely some double checking of maybe some financial undertakings, some investments. Good time to review your portfolios if you have them, or just really get a handle on your finances so that you really know what's going on in that area of your life, because that's really where there's going to be an intense focus. Of course, with that full moon taking place in the 8th house of very deep, intense, intimate relationships, of your house of depth, deep sexuality, really. So this could be a really intense full moon in terms of your relationships, an opportunity to really go deeper. Something from the past in your relationship could be brought up at this time. But an opportunity to work on that as well, right? This is the difference between your own resources, your own values, and other people's resources, other people's values, your partners. It's why the 8th house is all about inheritance and other people's wealth. It's also about, being able to get, psychological resources from your partners, right? Emotional resources. So look for those areas of your life to be highlighted by this full moon, and then just look at that financial sector as something to be really aware of. Something could be a miss there that you don't want to overlook. You want to be very detail-oriented in your financial areas of your life. Now, considering the Jupiter factor for our Taurus rising folks, well, that Jupiter is dipping its toes into your 11th house. So there's a sense of some big social opportunities coming your way, some connection to something bigger, community or otherwise, where for you Taurus rising folks, the last 6 months has been all about Jupiter moving through your 10th house. So presumably you've been seeing some expanded opportunities in your career, in that public sphere. And now as it moves into the 11th, and then we'll move back into the 10th when it retrogrades for the rest of the year, again, maybe some missed opportunities in that career field that you passed on or just wasn't quite right at the time. You may be getting a second chance at some real growth opportunities within your career. So keep an eye out for that. And if you get the opportunity, seize it, because it could be something really beneficial going forward And as Jupiter then moves into the 11th house, something that you can really manifest and carry off and be of value for you in some social way. All right, let's keep moving forward now, and let's consider Gemini risings. Of course, this is going to be a huge month for you Gemini rising folks, because all of this Gemini energy taking place in your first house. And so this full moon, this lunar eclipse takes place along your first and seventh house excuse me, axis. So that's really going to be an intense focus on yourself and your relationship, right? That first seventh, which is, you know, what you are oriented to in terms of who am I, and then who am I reflected in the relationships I choose to have. You know, you tend to be attracted to these Sagittarian type of people who have that very deep philosophical wisdom oriented. That's a nice complement to your own tendency to be very detail oriented, very much into information and data, and much more in that Gemini modality. This sense of the Sagittarius really balances you out, it harmonizes you. So that is going to be in really strong focus here for Gemini risings, particularly this week. And then you'll be reviewing all of that over the course of the next 3 weeks as Mercury retrogrades through your first house. So you could be making some really big changes in your lifestyle, in how you're presenting. You may have, changing your look. You may be changing something about yourself is under review. And so this will be a period to really go back over that and reflect on, what am I trying to do? How am I trying to show up differently in the world? And maybe make some tweaks to that over the course of the next few weeks, so that as that moves forward again and you get that Mercury direct energy, you really have a new sense of yourself going forward. Now we're also getting, for Gemini risings, Jupiter is making its foray into your 10th house, because you have Pisces on the 10th. So you're starting to get a glimpse, you're dipping your toes in the water here with Jupiter, of some new career opportunity, possibly a career change, something like a promotion could be on the horizon, but it might be just some intimations of it. And again, it's going to retrograde and go back into your 9th house for most of the rest of 2021, where there's some missed opportunity in maybe higher education, something to do with foreign ideas, foreign travel, something to do with your own philosophical, spiritual, or religious ideas, right? There's something that's been a focus, and some opportunities have come in your life over the course of the beginning of this year. And again, something may have been missed that you want to get a second chance at whenever Jupiter goes retrograde. And when it's doing that between signs, we tend to see this, right? It wants to go back and really give you a second chance at getting something right that you may have missed, so that when it goes direct back in the later part of 2021, you'll be able to seize on an opportunity, something that you can build on, that's going to have probably a big impact in your career, or your reputation, or how you're showing up in the world and in the public at large. So keep an eye on that, my Gemini rising friends. Okay, so what happens if we move to Cancer rising? Well, now this lunar axis, this eclipse, is taking place on your 12th and your 6th house. So much different energy for Cancers, right? All of this Gemini stuff is all going on in your 12th house. It's all much more internal. It's much more in your dreams, your fantasy world, right? Your emotions, your deeper interiority is coming under intense pressure, and a lot of, I would think, inner dialogue for Cancer rising folks, because of that. Your nature of, you tend to internalize this Gemini aspect. It tends to be hidden or secretive, internal, right? That's what the 12th house can represent. So with Cancer rising and that Gemini in the 12th, a lot of energy going on. But there's something new trying to emerge here too, in terms of your deeper connection to perhaps your spirituality, some connection to the higher good. 12th house also connected to artistic pursuits, right? We think of music and poetry and film, very expressive, very Neptunian-like qualities. So that's being highlighted for you on the eclipse. And if we consider, with Jupiter making this first move into your ninth house connected to, philosophy and spirituality, a new ways of thinking, maybe some new educational opportunities, maybe some travel opportunities that are going to start to show up for you, connection to foreign people or places or ideas, getting a glimpse of that. But again, it's going to retrograde, and that Jupiter for Cancer rising is going to back up into the eighth house. So maybe some second chances, missed opportunities. That's an expansion within your intense, intimate relationships. Something about resources within your partnerships, that shared resources, perhaps, or just some, emotional or psychological benefits to be reaped within your intense, personal, intimate relationships. That might be something that gets a second chance during this retrograde period with Jupiter moving back into Aquarius. I'm going to move forward and get to Leo rising. Okay, so now we see the axis shifting to the 11th and the 5th house. So what's going on with your Gemini? Well, this is a super social month for Leo risings, right? I mean, all of this Gemini energy moving through your 11th house of social connections and networking and peer groups and clubs. And it's like, I'm sure your phone's ringing off the hook. You're getting a lot of invitations, perhaps, for a lot of social engagements. And that's in contrast on this full moon being highlighted by your own personal 5th house, your house of creativity, your house of self-expression, right? Which for Leo rising tends to have that Sagittarius theme. You have a very almost philosophical way that you go about your creativity. It's like creativity is a religion for you. It's cosmological. It's the biggest picture possible. Leo, no surprise, Leo risings would have that very dramatic sense of their creativity, right? Because it's more that fire energy. Well, that's being highlighted during this eclipse, and with the South Node moving through your 5th house. Okay, so there's something about your old ways of expressing, your old ways of creating. Is there a call for reviving those? And is there some new connection here in your social group that could influence how you show up and how you express yourself creatively or otherwise? And then considering Jupiter has been in your 7th house, lots of expansive opportunities in relationships, one-on-one relationships, whether they be intimate sexual partners or business partners, any really strong connections on a one-on-one level. Well, Jupiter's now going to move into that 8th house. You're getting a glimpse of some deeper connections that can be experienced in some of these one-on-one relationships. Some of that 7th house energy now expanding in the 8th house, going deeper, really exploring some depth. But again, just a preview of it, because it's going to retrograde, move back into that 7th house. And again, maybe something overlooked, something missed in your area of relationships in your lives that you want to go back. And maybe there was a misconnection. Maybe there was someone new that you met that you weren't quite sure, like that person, that opportunity could come back into your life under this retrograde influence of Jupiter moving back through your 7th. Let's move forward and let's look at Virgo rising. So now with our Virgos, the eclipse is happening on your 10th and 4th house axis. Pretty heavy fundamental structural impact, right? So Gemini on your 10th house of career, lots of buzz, lots of activity for you in that career sector. Probably getting a lot of attention, a lot of talk about your career, maybe some changes, maybe some new ways of expressing yourself in your career. In contrast to this full moon conjunct the South Node in the 4th house in Sagittarius. So for you, Virgo rising folks, that Sagittarius, that philosophical side of yourself tends to be more show up more in your fourth house. It's in your family. It's in your tradition. It's in how you root and anchor your life, your deepest identity. You really need to have a sense of really knowing where you fit in. I think that's something that Virgo rising folks struggle with or put a lot of emphasis on. It's certainly going to be highlighted during this lunar eclipse here as the moon and the south node conjunct in your fourth house. It's going to hit you in a very profoundly personal, fundamental way. May bring up issues within your family or your family of origin or older family issues, right? We think about the past. This entire period of the nodes moving through, the south node moving through Sagittarius, moving through your fourth house, maybe bringing up some old stories, old scripts about your upbringing, where you come from, your place of origin, right? And there's something in the world that's calling you out of that. It's either in your career, in the public at large. There's some new idea, there's some new energy, right? That dynamic is very present for Virgo risings right now. And with Mercury going back over in retrograde through your 10th house of career, so you really want to be focused on getting it right. You want to be very clear in your communications within the workplace during this period, because there's a lot of opportunity for some miscommunications to occur in that area of your life. Of course, this is T-squaring, and we got Jupiter coming into your 7th house of relationships. So over the past year, a lot of focus and expansion has probably been more on yourself, on your work, on your daily routines, on your health, your well-being. Probably feel a great sense of abundance within that sector. So now you're getting a hint of what's going to come later in the year. Is this some expansive opportunity coming in your 7th house of relationships? But again, it's just a preview, right? Because by early June, it starts to retrograde, and it's going to go back and review some of these 6th house issues. What opportunities might have been missed in that area of your life? Health, wellness, your work, your daily routine, your habits. How can you expand or revise or improve on some of those areas of your life? And of course, Virgo rising, you're all about improving. This is your 6th house is your wheelhouse in a lot of ways. So just be aware and be open to finding some new expansive opportunities that you may have missed, right? New opportunities or another chance at an opportunity. Moving on with our Libra rising friends. Of course, now we have sort of the opposite here of what we have with Aries rising. You've got these inverted, right, as all you Libra risings do. All of this Gemini energy is taking place in your 9th house of higher learning, of wisdom and philosophy, of spirituality, of religion, of connection to foreign ideas, foreign people, foreign places, right? Lots of buzzy activity there, right? If you're in a higher education environment, lots of energy and attention, lots of information being thrown back and forth. Of course, this is in contrast to your more personal communication style, your written and verbal skills, language, communication, how you effectively communicate your mind and your ideas, your own mental process, right? It's coming up for review with the South Node moving through Sagittarius through this year. And on this full moon, that really is going to be highlighted, right? How do I think? What is the philosophy of my own mind? What is my philosophy about how I express myself, how I communicate, how I share information, how I speak, how I listen? All coming under review over the course of this, or certainly coming into focus during this full moon. And then we'll have Mercury retrograding through that 9th house. So going over some of those bigger philosophical plans, perhaps, some of the ambitions for higher learning, some of your connections to mentors or gurus or wisdom keepers, I always think about with the 9th house. And some information coming your way. before we move on, we'll just think about how for Libra rising, Jupiter's dipping its toes into your 6th house. So there's going to be some new opportunities in your day-to-day work life, in your craft, in your skill set, or in your area of health and well-being. Jupiter has spent the last 6 months, the beginning of this year, moving through your 5th house. So you've probably had a lot of surge in creative capacity, just a desire to be really expressive, to be creative, to really present yourself in a new and dramatic way, right? And again, there was some likely some big opportunities in that part of your life that you're going to get a chance again at as Jupiter moves back through that part of your chart over the rest of the year in Aquarius. Think about what that represents for you. You're always innovating, right? As a Libra rising, you have Aquarius on that 5th house. Some new innovative way of expressing with Jupiter moving back through there. Maybe a missed opportunity that you want to seize upon over the next couple of weeks and throughout the rest of the year. All right, let's move on to Scorpio here. And with Scorpio rising, we're going to get Gemini occurring in your 8th house, in your Scorpio house. So this will be a really, for most folks, this could be tricky, but I think for Scorpio risings, this is probably going to be kind of fun because you love exploring the 8th house anyway. This is your wheelhouse in a lot of ways. So having all of this Gemini energy, this intellectual, social curiosity around 8th house issues, really deeply exploring your relationships, your intimacy, your partnerships, exploring the hidden things, exploring occult, occult ideas or things that are secret. Astrology itself, there may be a huge fascination with learning astrology or learning more about some esoteric subjects. Could be very interesting to you during this period. Of course, this is coming with the moon in that full moon happening in your 2nd house. Values, resources, money, finances. So this connection between your resources, the resources of others, a lot of attention on how you utilize and have access to shared resources at this time versus your old way perhaps of being very self-reliant, being insecure because you seeking security, I should say, in self-reliance and being a bit insecure in your ability to trust the other, right? It's kind of there is that tension with Scorpio energy, right? It does want to deeply trust, but it also is a little insecure. So relationship energy and resources, issues of resources could be a big factor that gets constellated under the influence of this full moon, this eclipse, and then gets something you have to work through and work out over the course of the retrograde period over the next few weeks. So you've had Jupiter, of course, moving through your 4th house, so there's been a lot of expansion in areas of your home, right? In your roots, where you're most comfortable, whether it's your physical home or the home of yourself, your emotional foundation. Hopefully has had some sort of some buoyancy over the course of the last 6 months with Jupiter moving through there. Some new ideas. Maybe you have some new plans on, maybe some ideas of moving, or you sold a house, or some great value has come into your property. You've improved your property. You've built an addition. With Jupiter moving into your 5th, that's going to start to expand into your area of creative self-expression. But of course, it's going to retrograde. So there's something maybe within that, whatever work you've done, either on your physical home, you've done on yourself, your establishment, how you've grounded yourself in the world. Another opportunity for something that may have been missed, and to get a second chance at whatever that might be for you, but usually in areas associated with the 4th house and the home. If we consider Sagittarius rising, well, now we get the opposite of what we have with Gemini, right? You've got all the Gemini energy over in your 7th house of relationships, and the full moon is coming in your 1st house of self. So you're getting a chance to really reflect on, you know, what is the philosophy of yourself, right? How do you present, you know, in Sag risings, you know, very much, you know, wear our hearts on our sleeves in a way. We are very almost evangelical in a way of whatever it is we believe, we are it, we express it, we live it, we wear it. So Sag rising's getting a chance to maybe bring that under a little review, and we've been sort of reviewing our personal philosophies over the course of this year with the South Node moving through Sagittarius, and of course lots of new focus and energy on our relationships. Lots of dialogue going on for Sag rising in the area of relationships, and of course when we have Mercury retrograding through there, we want to be aware of any difficulties, challenges, crossing mixed messages, right? Not being understood, especially with Venus in there. Okay, but a chance to really communicate clear, and really reconsider how you do communicate in your relationships, whether it's your personal, intimate relationships, whether it's how you communicate with an important business partner, or anyone you really value, those really important one-on-one connections. Lots of energy for you guys over the course of this month. Now, with Jupiter, it has been moving through your third house of communications, of expression, self-expression, right? So you've probably had a lot of expansion to how you've been communicating, expressing yourself, probably writing projects, or anything in communication, the media, things of that nature, your blog posts or something, right? You're getting a lot of expansion for your writing. Well, it's about to move into your fourth house, and so that focus will shift into maybe changing homes, or building an addition, or expanding your foundation, right? But it's just a preview, right? Because by, like I said, end of June, we start that retrograde, and then Jupiter's going to go back through your third house. And okay, again, was there an opportunity that presented itself in that area of communication, right? That you may have been just a glimpse of, you didn't quite get your brain around it, and now you get a new chance to really expand and grow how effectively you communicate and express yourself and share your ideas. Third house. That's something that you want to look out for over the course of the next few months with that retrograde. All right, Cap rising. Now we get the 6th, 12th house axis going on, right? So the opposite of our Cancer rising, folks. Here, Gemini is in your 6th house of your daily routines, your workaday life, your ability to hone your craft, to ply your trade, which for Caps risings has a very Gemini quality to it. You're able to use your mind in a way that is very practical, very useful, very utilitarian. And of course, all this Gemini energy this time of year certainly bringing a lot of focus to that part of your life. You've been thinking a lot about your work, your routine. You may be thinking a lot about your health, or your diet, or your wellness program, if you will. And that's being opposed here with this eclipse and the full moon taking place over in your 12th house, which is your more hidden house, right? This is your sense and connection to the divine, to the spiritual, to the transcendental, or to some really deep creative expression, as we talked about: music, poetry, film, the ethereal, the ephemeral, right? So again, this entire year, with the nodal axis moving backwards through your 12th house, old ways, some old patterns being reconsidered in a lot of ways, and are going to come up during this full moon and this eclipse, and highlighted by this 6th, 12th house axis. So, you're going to have Mercury retrograding through that 6th house. So again, look for areas to communicate better within the workplace. 6th house represents, boss-employee relationships, um, people who are in service. You may be exposed to new ideas within that realm. There may be some confusion, though, with that retrograde energy, so just be extra cautious and careful with your languaging, certainly in the workplace, Caps. Now, you guys have Jupiter about to move into your third house, so it's going to expand in that communication, that part of your life. But for the last year, the last 6 months, we should say, for most of so far this year, you guys have had Jupiter moving through your second house of resources, of values, of financial opportunities, of money. So most likely you've had some good opportunities to make some coin over this first part of 2021. And again, Jupiter's going to retrograde through that last part of your second house over the rest of the year for the most part. So again, another chance at some opportunities with Jupiter moving back through. What, was there a financial investment opportunity that just didn't feel right at the time, that now in hindsight you're like, maybe some things have shifted, and it's like, maybe now is a better timing for some of those things, certainly as things move forward, but a chance to review them, especially with the Mercury retrograde period. Go over some of those things. See if some new information doesn't present itself within that area. Okay, Aquarius rising. Now we've got Gemini happening over in the 5th house. So all kinds of energy this month with your creativity and your self-expression and just fun and play. It was just a really fun time for Aquarius rising folks. Now, this full moon and this eclipse energy is going to highlight your 11th house, your social network. And of course, Aquarius risings are very connected to their social network, right? So having Sagittarius on your 11th house, having this full moon configuration in there, time to reflect on some of your probably oldest and dearest connections, some of those old, long-standing social connections that you've had and that you value and that are stimulating to you, that that share your common way of looking at the world. But maybe some of that comes under review for you. Maybe there's some reflection on, do I still share those values? Maybe are some of these connections that I'm holding on to just because they're so old and traditional and because I value them? Do I need to shake up my social circles a little bit? Maybe mix up with some new folks, And some of this energy, this Gemini energy, lots of creativity, lots of expression, lots of possibility, lots of interaction, and some creative endeavors of yours. Some opportunities present themselves to reflect on that dynamic. Of course, with Mercury going retrograde through your 5th house, chance to review some. If you've got any creative projects that you've already started, great time to really go over those and fine-tune them, work out the kinks of anything that you may be presenting to the world, because if you use this retrograde energy well, then when it moves forward, you'll really be able to dial in whatever it is creatively that you're creating and working on at this time. As well, Aquarius, this has been a really fun year for you guys. You guys had the great conjunction to start the year on your rising, on your first house. So this has been a very Aquarian year, very Aquarian themed. And so I'm sure all of you Aquarius risings are feeling that really profoundly. And will continue to. But now, with Jupiter sort of dipping its toes in your second house, you're going to start to see some glimpses of some new financial opportunities, some new ways of earning your living, perhaps, of making some money, some resources presenting themselves to you. But it's just a glimpse. And again, Jupiter's going to move back through your first house. So some of these new ways you've been experimenting with, some of these very Aquarian modalities, I think amongst all of the signs and rising signs, Aquarius really is embodying this shift that's taking place that we're experiencing throughout our greater culture, really. You guys, we're kind of looking to you to sort of be beacons in a way. I think collectively you are. You're probably showing up within your communities, right? 11th house, interestingly enough, right? And sort of reflecting and some of these changes that are taking place. Very future oriented, very rebellious or innovative in a way, right? And again, something maybe some second chance at some of that expansion to be experimented with and explored during this Jupiter retrograde phase. Second chances, as I'm calling this. So, all right, lastly but never leastly, in our Pisces friends, always used to being last, right? But we save the best for last, right? Pisces. Again, this is going to be the opposite of our Virgo friends, where you've got all of your Gemini energy in your 4th house. So your home is likely quite busy, quite buzzy, quite chatty. A lot of information, a lot of communication, a lot of talk going on in areas surrounding your home. Ideas about changing and remodeling or even moving, or your neighbors and your neighborhoods. All this Gemini energy is very buzzy is the word I keep thinking of. Now the eclipse for you and the new moon, well, this highlights your 10th house, right? So now we're talking about career, we're talking about your reputation. And Pisces rising tend to have that very Sagittarian way of presenting themselves in public and within the workplace and within their careers. They're very high-minded, right? You tend to be very high-minded in your career. Well, that's being reflected and being considered in this eclipse. It's being intensely focused on. And again, with that South Node moving through your 10th house this year, lots of reflection on, how have you made your living thus far? Your career may be coming under review for you. Is the philosophical framework within which you pursue your career coming under reconsideration? Is there some new modalities that you should be exploring? Maybe a career change. With all of this Gemini energy in your 4th house, like that dynamic between your public and your private, between work and home, right? Between the career and family, really coming under intense focus for you during this this full moon and this eclipse. And then, of course, that energy will get intensified, and you'll get a chance to really go over it as we get Mercury retrograding through your 4th house. So again, watch out for miscommunication within the family, right? Be aware of and open to dialogue, and be aware of the chance for slips of the tongue, or some languaging that could be not quite ideal. Okay, but something new is emerging in here. There's so much energy this month that you should find ways of incorporating that and dialoguing, and it could be really fun, like a lot of fun, curious expression within the family too. So now you've been spending the last part of this year with Jupiter moving through your 12th house, right? So there's some hidden boon. You've been expanding inward, right? So your internal process, some probably big dreams have been fermenting for our Pisces rising friends, right? As Jupiter's moved through your 12th house. Well, now it's about to break across the threshold and come into your 1st house and dip its toes in. Okay, all of this expansion that's been going under the surface, or it's been unconscious, right? Just below the surface, now is trying to poke its way through, and you're getting this glimpse of some bigger version of yourself that's on the horizon, that's going to get the chance to emerge over the next year. But again, we're just getting a glimpse, and then it's going to retrograde and move back into your 12th house, so it'll sort of re-internalize again. And I think you're going to have to review some of those very big ideas, some of those big visions that you've had that are very new, very Aquarian, and for you, very cutting edge, right? Recapitulate inside of that, go back in, and again, see if there's been an opportunity missed. Go over that material again and revisit it, revise it, reformulate the dream, the vision, so that when it moves forward again later in the year, and then spends a year moving through your first house, boy, are you just going to really show up. Your biggest, best version of yourself will be possible in the year to come, going into 2022. So, all right, that's a trip around the zodiac. Again, a very intense couple weeks coming up for all of us. And you can see how that plays out for all of us in different ways. It's the same sort of modalities, the same archetypes being constellated both by wherever Gemini and Sagittarius is for all of us, wherever Jupiter is moving into that threshold between Pisces and Aquarius, and it just shifts around. We're all dealing with it, but we're all having it show up for us in different areas of our life, and we're all integrating in new ways. So hopefully that's helpful. Always enjoy going through all the signs. Yeah, so, you know, I wish you guys all a happy and healthy, fun eclipse season. Stay very aware, stay very focused, and then really try to use this upcoming Mercury Retrograde in Gemini to really, you know, rewrite some of these scripts, right? Build a better app. Rework some of the code, some of that source code. It's a really good time to review it, reprogram it, so that when, you know, Mercury moves forward towards the end of June and then into the summer, boy, we'll be, you know, properly aligned with the astrological configurations that are encouraging us to then take that energy and move it forward. So a lot of new possibilities can present themselves. All right. Well, that's it for this episode. Till next time. Sat Nam, everyone.